I only wanted soup. The late-night diner glowed like a lighthouse at the corner of Halsted and 29th, all chrome edges and buzzing neon. I pushed the door with my shoulder and slipped inside, clutching my coat closed over my belly as if one extra button could erase 8 months of truth. Grease and coffee, pepper and lemon, comfort lived in that air. I told myself I could be invisible here. Order chicken soup. Sit near the window, pretend the world wasn't watching. Then I heard his laugh. It hit me before the name did, warm and practiced, the sound of someone who never doubts himself. I turned, and the world narrowed to one face, framed by men in suits and women in jewel-bright dresses. Ethan. My ex-husband stood at the end of a pushed-together line of tables, a tumbler of something expensive in his hand. When his gaze drifted lazily across the room and collided with me, the glass lowered. The smile didn't. I thought of the papers he'd left on the counter months ago, already signed. I thought of the tiny blue plus on a stick the next morning. I thought of the lies I'd stacked between myself and this moment like sandbags. They dissolved in an instant. "Claire," he said, loud enough to turn heads. Then louder. "Well, look at you." Conversation dipped. Forks hovered. I kept moving toward the counter. If I pretended not to hear him, maybe I could keep the night small and harmless. I ordered soup with a voice that didn't sound like mine. The waitress nodded, sympathy flickering across her eyes before duty smoothed it away. Ethan's footsteps tapped the tile. Measured. I felt him before I watched him. 8 months, he announced as if delivering quarterly results. Do I have that right? I turned. My coat gaped when I did. There was no hiding it now, the curve, the certainty. His smile sharpened. Timing is fascinating. Heat crawled up my neck. "Please go back to your table." He lifted his glass by the rim, like he might toast. "We signed in January. It's September. I'm just doing the math like everyone else." I said go. He took a step closer. He smelled like cedar and winter. "Who's the father, Claire? Or do you prefer to keep that flexible?" Someone laughed, short and mean. The sound fractured me. I pressed my palm to my belly, protective and automatic. The baby shifted, a firm reminder against my skin, not alone. My mouth opened, the truth perched on my tongue, wild and hot. But I could see what came next if I said it. Custody battles, surveillance, the same man who once measured my joy with a stopwatch measuring my schedule, my food, my breath. I closed my mouth. Silence turned into its own confession. Ethan lifted the glass and tipped it toward his friends. "There you have it." "You're cruel," I whispered. He leaned in, voice low enough for only me. "I'm careful. There's a difference. You were always too soft to learn it." The first bowl of soup landed in front of me with a gentle clink. My hands shook. I couldn't lift the spoon. Across the room, a man in a gray hoodie paused with his burger halfway to his mouth. He wasn't dressed for this crowd. He didn't look away from me, even when his friend nudged him. Something calculating lived behind his calm eyes, like he was running numbers no one else could see. Ethan noticed the attention and welcomed it. "Should we take a poll?" he asked his table. "Boss? Neighbor? Delivery guy?" Laughter rolled like a tide. I stared at the spoon, at the surface tension trembling, holding itself together the way I was trying to. The baby pressed hard under my ribs. I breathed so I wouldn't break. "You don't get to humiliate me," I said, still to the spoon, because I didn't trust my voice with his face. "I don't have to," he said. "You did that for both of us." He straightened, performance completed, and the room swallowed me whole. I tried to stand and almost didn't. The chair scraped too loudly. The sound was a siren I couldn't shut off. I kept one hand on the table and the other on my belly, the only 2 anchors I had left. "Sit," Ethan said, the command wrapped in silk. "Stress isn't good for whatever that is." "Child," I said. "He's a child." "Is he?" His eyes glittered. "To someone." I felt the first tear break. I didn't wipe it. When humiliation is total, there's almost no point in neatness. A woman from Ethan's end of the table leaned out, a shiny name badge winking on her dress. "Some girls like drama," she offered, to no one, and to everyone. "Keeps them interesting." More laughter. A busboy slowed to listen. The waitress hovered, wanting to help, and knowing she couldn't. I found Ethan's eyes and held them because I had to find something solid. "You left me before you asked a single question. You don't get answers now. And yet," he said, "you're here in the open. Did you want me to see? Is this the game?" My throat burned. I wanted soup. Of course, he said lightly. Cravings. The word landed like a bruise. I looked for exits and saw only faces. That was when the man in the gray hoodie stood. He didn't make a speech. He didn't stride. He simply stood and set money under his untouched plate, and every movement was deliberate enough to draw attention without begging for it. Enough, he said, not to me, to Ethan. The room stilled as if someone had pulled a plug. Ethan's jaw flexed. He hated being contradicted. He loathed being managed. Sit down, he told the man, dropping the warmth from his voice like a coat. This isn't your business. The man's gaze cut to me and returned to Ethan. You made it everyone's business the second you raised your voice. Do you know her? Ethan challenged. The pause was a fraction too long to be nothing. The man's eyes flicked to my hands, to the place I held tight. He didn't smile. He didn't soften. He just absorbed the room and returned it sharper. I know enough. Ethan laughed, brittle. Then you know she's always been good at secrets. My knees bent without my permission. The chair caught me. I hated the relief. I hated that he saw it. You should go home, the waitress whispered, merciful and practical. I'll pack the soup. Leave it, Ethan said smoothly. She's full. The hoodie man's fingers drummed once on the table he'd left. A muscle in his cheek jumped. He took one step closer, staying a safe distance, keeping his voice level. You have no idea what you're talking about, he told Ethan. Walk away. Ethan's eyes thinned. He measured the room the way he measured markets, found his advantage, and smiled for it. Everyone here knows me, he said to the crowd, a host again. We'll be fine. He drifted back toward his table. As he passed me, he lowered his voice so only I could hear. Think hard about the story you plan to tell when this baby arrives. I will check the math. He tapped the table with 2 fingers like a signature. Then he was gone, fielding questions, soaking in sympathy he hadn't earned. The waitress set a paper bag near my elbow. There's bread in there, she whispered. It helps with the acid. Thank you, I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. I stood slower this time. The room hummed back to life. Forks resumed, voices rose, gossip spread in tidy little currents that would outlive the night. I took 3 steps and almost collided with the hoodie man. Up close, he seemed both older and younger than he'd looked across the room. The kind of face that changes when it's thinking. There was a scar at his hairline, a pale line that suggested he'd learned at least one lesson the hard way. You don't owe him anything, he said quietly. He thinks I do, I answered. He thinks a lot of things. His gaze lowered, not to my belly but to the way I held it. Don't let him decide what you say next. I should have asked who he was, why he cared, how he knew to step in. Instead, I heard myself ask, why do you sound like you've met him before? He looked over my shoulder to where Ethan orchestrated a fresh round of laughter. Because men like him repeat themselves. Different rooms, same script. You don't even know my name. I'll learn it when you're ready. He shifted aside so I could pass. As he did, something small slid from the chest pocket of his hoodie and caught on the edge of the sugar caddy. An index card folded once with a smudge of ink at the corner. He didn't notice. I did. Hey, I started, but he was already moving, paying, gone into the neon. I unfolded the card with shaking fingers. Inside, a line of tidy handwriting waited like a door. He doesn't know. Yet. The words were not a threat. They weren't comfort either. They were a promise I didn't understand. A car horn barked outside. I flinched. I tucked the card deep into my coat and walked out into the night that had started with soup and ended with a sentence I could not stop hearing. He doesn't know, yet. The air was cooler than when I'd come in. I breathed it like medicine, one careful dose at a time. The baby rolled, slow and certain, and I pressed my palm there, answering the movement with a vow I'd never said out loud. We will decide what comes next. Behind me, the diner buzzed and glowed, full of people who thought they'd witnessed a whole story in 15 minutes. They hadn't. They'd only seen the first page. I stepped off the curb and felt, for the first time since Ethan said my name, the ground under my feet. This wasn't over. It had barely begun. My name is Claire Thompson. I am 32 years old, and until recently I believed my life was ordinary. I grew up in Joliet, Illinois, in a 1-story house that always smelled of laundry soap and overcooked spaghetti. My mother raised me alone after my father left when I was 6. She worked 2 jobs, days at the grocery, nights cleaning offices. So I learned to make my own dinners, walk myself to school, and hide my tears so she wouldn't feel guilty for missing bedtime. I became strong the way children of single mothers do, quietly, stubbornly, without asking for help. But strength is not the same as safety. I met Ethan at 26. He was magnetic, tall, immaculate, the kind of man who carried sunlight into a room and knew it. He sold commercial real estate like he was born to, charming clients with that voice, those eyes, that laugh. I didn't think he'd ever notice me, the girl who wore clearance rack shoes and worked as a paralegal. But he did, or at least he chose me. Flowers at my desk, surprise dinners, the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world. My friends called me lucky. I believed them. We married quickly, too quickly. A downtown ceremony, champagne, vows I thought were solid as stone. For a while, I lived inside a fairy tale. But fairy tales rot when you don't notice the cracks. Ethan's charm was a mask that stayed on in public and slipped off in private. He was restless, impatient, dismissive. When I cried from stress, he'd roll his eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Claire. You're stronger than that." At first, I tried harder. I cooked elaborate dinners. I ironed his shirts. I rehearsed cheerful stories for when he came home. But nothing softened him. He wanted a partner who would never need, never falter, never complain. He wanted a shadow he could control. And I wanted to be enough. The cracks widened into fault lines. Arguments went unresolved. Nights stretched long and silent. I told myself every marriage hit rough patches. I told myself he would come back to me. Until one morning, a neat stack of papers waited on the counter. His signature already bled into the last page. No fight. No conversation. Just the end. I should have screamed. I should have begged him to look at me. Instead, I signed where he asked and walked away carrying nothing but my clothes and a hollow chest. And then, 2 weeks later, I found out. Pregnant, 8 weeks along. I sat on the bathroom floor clutching the test, tears blurring the plus sign. Not tears of fear, not of joy. A mix so sharp it left me gasping, because I wanted this baby. But not like this. Not in silence, not alone. I considered telling Ethan. I drafted the call in my head 100 times, but every version ended the same way, with his cold eyes and colder voice. He would take the child from me. He would make rules, dictate terms, measure my worth in decimals. So I made a choice: silence. For 8 months, I carried both the child and the secret. I bought coats 2 sizes too large. I avoided old friends. I invented excuses to my mother, saying I was too busy for visits. My world narrowed to doctor appointments and whispered promises into the dark. Every kick inside me was a miracle and a sentence. I loved this baby fiercely, but the love came tangled with fear. Fear of discovery, fear of judgment, fear that one wrong step would place me back under Ethan's shadow forever. I told myself secrecy was strength. I told myself hiding was protection. I almost believed it. Until last night at the diner, when Ethan's voice cracked open everything I'd built. Now the truth bleeds at the edges, and strangers leave messages on folded index cards. And I, who thought I could control the story, realize I never truly did. The diner was never meant to be a theater. It was small, square, built of chrome and linoleum. Red leather booths sagged with use, the jukebox in the corner stuttered old rock songs, and the air smelled of coffee grounds and fryer grease. I used to love that smell. It reminded me of the early years with Ethan, when pancakes at midnight meant adventure, not insomnia. We'd sit in the very back booth, laugh over syrup stains, and believe the world was ours. But that night, the diner turned against me. Every light was too bright, every booth was a witness, every face became a jury. Ethan had a gift for commanding rooms. He didn't shout, he simply shifted his voice until it carried smooth and polished, reaching ears that didn't want it. 8 months, he mused, standing over me. Isn't that something? He wasn't talking to me, he was talking to them. His colleagues leaned forward, curiosity blooming into gossip. A man in a suit whispered, 8 months? And a woman beside him hid her smile behind a glass of wine. I felt heat crawl up my neck. My coat slipped open when I turned, exposing the undeniable swell of my belly. Gasps rippled like a stone dropped into water. Timing, Ethan said, savoring the word. Divorce in January, baby in September. Fascinating arithmetic. Laughter flickered. A fork clinked against a plate. I pressed my hand against my belly, not to hide it. There was no hiding anymore, but to shield it. My baby rolled gently, as if he knew he was the target. I searched the room for an ally. The waitress stood frozen with a tray of coffee, pity softening her eyes but fear holding her still. A mother in the corner booth pulled her son closer, murmuring something into his hair. A young couple leaned in to whisper, their glances darting like arrows between me and Ethan. It was a silent chorus. Look at her. Look at what she's done. The walls seemed to press closer. The booths tilting in, the neon sign outside buzzing like an accusation. I wanted to stand, to walk out, but my legs refused. I was anchored, not by choice, but by the weight of humiliation. Ethan moved like he was giving a performance. He strolled back toward his table, then pivoted so everyone could see my silence. Strange, isn't it? He said to the room. No answer. Not a word. Almost as if silence speaks louder than truth. He chuckled, and a few at his table echoed him. I felt the sound slice through me like glass. My throat burned. Words rose, desperate to escape. This child is yours, Ethan, yours. But the image of his cold, measuring eyes silenced me again. If I told him now, he'd take control of my future the way he always had. So I said nothing, and my silence became his proof. That was when I noticed him. In the far corner, a man sat alone in a gray hoodie. His burger sat untouched. His hands rested on the table, fingers drumming once, twice, 3 times. He wasn't laughing, he wasn't whispering, he was watching. His gaze didn't flick away when I met it. It held steady, as if he were reading lines no one else could see. A chill rippled through me. Who was he? Why did his eyes feel less like judgment and more like recognition? The waitress shifted beside me. Would you like your order to go? She asked softly, almost pleading. Yes, I whispered, my voice cracking. But Ethan overrode her. Leave it, he said. She's eaten enough. The laugh that followed was crueler than any slap. My stomach clenched. My baby pressed hard against my ribs and I swallowed bile. The diner tilted again, no longer a refuge but a battlefield, and I was losing ground fast. Ethan had always known how to turn a crowd. He didn't just speak, he performed. Every gesture was deliberate, every pause perfectly timed, as if he were delivering closing arguments in a courtroom. And tonight, I was the case he meant to win. He returned from his table with the slow, measured steps of a man who owned the floor. He set his glass on the edge of mine, leaning down just enough that I could smell the sharp tang of whiskey and cedar. You always thought silence made you dignified, he said, voice pitched for me alone. But to everyone else, it makes you guilty. My lips parted, but nothing came. He was right about one thing. Silence was no shield. It was a noose. Ethan straightened, raising his voice again so the diners wouldn't miss a word. 8 months pregnant, my ex-wife. Yet I'm the last to know. Interesting, isn't it? Laughter bubbled from his table, brittle and eager. A man slapped his palm on the booth, muttering, unbelievable. A woman in a red dress leaned forward, chin resting on her hand. Maybe she doesn't even know who the father is, she said brightly, and the line drew cruel laughter from every corner. I froze. My chest tightened so hard I thought my ribs might crack. I wanted to scream, to shout the truth, that this child was his, that I had never betrayed him. But the picture was already painted, and my silence colored it darker. He saw my tears before I could wipe them. He smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but with triumph. That was Ethan's real face. Not the polished smile he wore for clients, not the charming host at galas. This one, the smirk of a man who fed on control, who thrived when someone else broke. Do you see now? He asked softly, bending close again. You're weak. You always were. That's why I left you. Memories slammed into me. The nights he timed how long I lingered at the grocery store. The way he corrected the clothes I chose before company dinners. The ledger he kept in his head, tallying my faults. He hadn't just left me, he had dismantled me piece by piece until I doubted every part of myself. And now he was finishing the job in public. The waitress tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire, do you want me to call someone? Ethan cut her off with a smile too sharp to be polite. She doesn't need anyone. She's made her choices. I felt the baby kick, harder this time, a jolt that snapped something inside me. I clenched the table, forcing myself not to collapse. My tears blurred the neon glow outside, the red booths, the smirking faces. You disgust me, Ethan said, louder now, letting the whole diner hear. And you should disgust yourself. For a moment, the room spun. The laughter, the whispers, the weight of his words, all of it pressed down, threatening to crush me. Then movement caught my eye. The man in the gray hoodie stood. He didn't rush, didn't shout. He simply rose, leaving a few bills under his untouched plate, and let the silence stretch until people noticed. "Enough," he said evenly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The diner stilled. Forks froze. Even Ethan blinked just once before masking it with a scoff. "Sit down," Ethan snapped. "This isn't your fight." The stranger's eyes held his, calm, unflinching. "You made it mine when you dragged her through the dirt in front of everyone." Murmurs rippled. The balance of the room shifted. Ethan's smirk faltered, then returned sharper, more brittle. "What are you, her new man? Another volunteer for her little game?" The stranger didn't answer. He looked at me instead, and his gaze was steady, almost protective. Then back to Ethan. "You think you know the truth. You don't." Ethan bristled. He hated being contradicted. He hated losing control. His jaw tightened and his mask cracked just enough for me to see the fury simmering underneath. "Walk away," Ethan growled. The stranger's lips curved, half smile, half warning. "Funny. That's exactly what you should do." The room buzzed with tension, diners holding their breath. For the first time that night, Ethan didn't have the crowd entirely on his side. He laughed, brittle and forced. "Pathetic," he muttered, retreating toward his table. But his eyes never left mine, and his last words were meant only for me. "This isn't over, Claire. Not by a long shot." I should have left. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to grab the paper bag the waitress packed, keep my head down, and walk out the door before Ethan found new words sharp enough to cut deeper. But I didn't. Because my legs felt rooted to the floor. Because my heart hammered in my throat. Because every face in that diner wanted a conclusion to the story Ethan had started. And I was trapped in the middle of it. He didn't stay in his seat long. Ethan thrived on dominance, and he couldn't bear the thought of a stranger stealing the spotlight. He stood again, glass in hand, his smile polished but eyes dark with fury. "Let's clear something up," he said, loud enough for the whole diner. "My ex-wife here likes to play the martyr. Poor, abandoned Claire, but she's not telling you the whole truth." The chatter stopped, forks stilled. Ethan's voice lowered to a poisonous drawl. "The truth is, she's carrying someone else's child. Not mine, never mine." Gasps rippled like electricity. My knees wobbled. I gripped the back of the chair to steady myself, shaking my head. "That's not," but he cut me off. "Don't bother denying it. Do the math. 8 months, divorce in January, and now this. You expect anyone to believe you didn't betray me before the papers were signed?" His words hit like stones, and the crowd was quick to throw more. "She cheated?" "Unbelievable. She should be ashamed." Whispers swirled like a tide, rising, drowning me. The worst blow came from a woman at Ethan's table, the one in the red dress with the sharp smile. She leaned forward, her voice slicing clear across the room. "Maybe she doesn't even know who the father is." Laughter erupted, louder this time. Some people covered their mouths, others didn't bother. Something inside me cracked. My throat burned, my eyes blurred, tears spilled hot down my cheeks. I pressed my hand against my belly, desperate to protect the only thing that still belonged to me. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing my despair. "I'm here, Mama," I imagined him saying. "Don't give up." I opened my mouth to shout the truth, to rip apart the lies. But my voice caught, strangled by fear. Because if I told him, the chains would snap shut again. He would take everything. The silence stretched, the crowd read it as confession. And Ethan smiled. Triumph gleamed in his eyes. "See?" he said smoothly. "Even she knows I'm right." Then, enough. The word cut through the chaos like a blade. The man in the gray hoodie stepped fully into the light, his presence steady, commanding without effort. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "You don't know the truth," he told Ethan, "so stop pretending you do." The diner hushed, all eyes turned to him. Ethan stiffened, fury flashing. "Who the hell are you? Another one of her mistakes?" The stranger didn't blink. "I'm someone who's tired of watching you destroy people." The tension snapped taut. Diners leaned in, sensing a shift. For the first time that night, the room wasn't entirely Ethan's. Ethan laughed harshly, brittle. "You don't even know her." The man's eyes flicked to me, just briefly. "Maybe I know more than you think." My heart stuttered. I didn't understand what he meant, but something in his gaze made my pulse quicken. Like recognition, like promise. Ethan's mask slipped just enough to reveal the anger simmering beneath. He turned back to his table, dismissing the man with a wave. "Pathetic," he muttered, but his voice lacked the power it had before. Still, his final words to me were low and cutting. "You'll regret this, I'll make sure of it." I stood frozen, tears cooling on my cheeks, the paper bag trembling in my hand. Around me, the diner hummed with whispers, eyes still darting between me, Ethan, and the stranger. But inside me, something had shifted. For the first time all night, I felt a flicker of something beyond shame, beyond fear. Hope. I left the diner like a ghost. The laughter, the whispers, the sting of Ethan's words clung to me even after the neon sign faded behind glass. I pulled my coat tighter around my belly, as if the fabric could shield me from everything I had just endured. The night was cool, sharp with the smell of rain on pavement, but nothing cleared the smoke of humiliation lodged in my lungs. Each step to the parking lot felt heavier than the last. My legs shook, my ankles swollen, the weight of 8 months pressing me down. I reached my car and fumbled for the handle, gripping the metal like it was the only solid thing left in the world. When the door shut, silence roared. I broke. My forehead dropped against the steering wheel, and sobs ripped through me, jagged and raw. I had spent 8 months building walls of secrecy, convincing myself silence meant strength. But Ethan had shattered it all in 15 minutes, turning my love for this child into a public circus. "I can't do this alone," I whispered, the words trembling in the dark. They were the truth I had been too proud to admit, the truth that terrified me more than Ethan's venom. Because admitting it meant I was weak, and weakness was what he always accused me of. Tears blurred the dashboard, my chest heaved, lungs clawing for air. I pressed one hand hard against my belly, grounding myself in the steady kicks beneath my palm. "I'm sorry," I choked to my baby. "I'm trying, I swear I'm trying." But doubt gnawed at me. Could I protect him? Could I keep Ethan away forever? Or would my silence ruin us both? A knock shattered the spiral. I gasped and jerked upright. My heart pounded as I wiped my eyes with trembling fingers. Through the glass, a face leaned into the dim glow of the parking lot lights. The man in the gray hoodie. He stood outside my window, steady, unreadable. His gaze wasn't mocking like the others. It was sharp, direct, carrying something that felt heavier than pity. I hesitated, then lowered the window just an inch. The night air slipped in, cool against my wet cheeks. He leaned slightly closer, his voice low but firm. "Don't let him destroy you. He doesn't know the truth. Not yet." The words hit me like a spark. My pulse stuttered. I wanted to ask, "What truth? How do you know?" But my throat tightened, and before I could gather the words, he stepped back. With 2 measured strides, he disappeared into the dark, swallowed by shadow. I sat frozen, my tears forgotten, his words echoing in my head. "He doesn't know. Yet." My hands shook as I pressed them harder against my belly. A strange mix of fear and something else pulsed through me, something dangerously close to hope. The engine ticked softly as the night stretched around me. My shame was still raw, my despair still heavy. But for the first time in months, I realized I wasn't the only one carrying a secret. Someone else knew something. And that changed everything. Morning came, but it didn't feel like light. I woke with swollen eyes and an ache deep in my chest, the kind that doesn't fade with rest. The clock read 9 a.m., but the room still felt like midnight. I shuffled to the kitchen, craving the comfort of tea. The kettle hissed, filling the silence, but my mind was louder, replaying Ethan's voice, the laughter, the whispers. Most of all, the stranger's words. "He doesn't know the truth. Not yet." I clung to them, turned them over in my head until they frayed. What truth could he possibly mean? I hadn't told a soul, not my mother, not my friends, not Ethan. Unless, I shook the thought away, but unease clung like a second skin. By afternoon, the doorbell rang once, then silence. I padded to the door and found nothing but an envelope lying neatly against the mat. No address, no markings. My stomach twisted. I bent down, belly heavy, and picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside was a single photograph. I froze. Ethan, standing with a woman I had never seen before. His arm wrapped around her waist, his lips brushing her cheek. The timestamp at the corner read, 9 months ago, 2 weeks before he left me. The photo slipped from my fingers. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the couch, clutching the image as if it might burn me. So that was it. All the nights he stayed late at work, all the coldness, all the dismissal. He hadn't been tired, he hadn't been stressed. He'd already moved on. He hadn't left me because of who I was. He had left me for her. And yet he stood in that diner, accusing me, humiliating me, painting me as the unfaithful one. My breath came ragged. Rage and grief tangled inside me until I didn't know which one hurt more. Something else slipped from the envelope. A folded piece of paper. I picked it up, heart pounding. The handwriting was sharp, precise. He doesn't deserve to know the child is his, not after what he did. A friend. My pulse roared in my ears. A friend? I looked around my small apartment as if the walls might confess who had been here. Was it the man in the gray hoodie? Had he sent this? Was he watching me, protecting me, or using me? The kettle whistled, shrill and sharp, but I couldn't move. I sat frozen, the photograph in one hand, the note in the other, the words echoing louder than the scream I couldn't release. He doesn't deserve to know. I pressed a trembling hand against my belly. My baby shifted under my palm, alive, real, mine. And for the first time, the truth weighed heavier than my fear. Ethan wasn't just cruel, he was guilty, and someone out there wanted me to know it. By nightfall, the envelope still lay open on my coffee table, its contents staring back at me like wounds that refused to close. The photo of Ethan with that woman, his hand curled possessively around her waist. The timestamp, proof carved in ink, and the note, those words gnawed at me louder than hunger, louder than the ache in my back. He doesn't deserve to know the child is his, not after what he did. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message carried a voice I had heard before. Calm, deliberate. The man in the gray hoodie. I couldn't sit with it any longer. My skin itched with the need for answers, my heart thundering with questions that could no longer be caged. So I drove. The streets blurred past in streaks of yellow lamplight. My belly tightened with each bump in the road, the baby shifting as if sensing my unrest. My palms slicked the steering wheel. I didn't know where I was going until I arrived. The river park. A quiet place, lit only by scattered lamps and the reflection of the moon on dark water. The air was damp, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves. And there he was, leaning against a lamppost, hands in his pockets, as though he'd been waiting for me all along. My breath caught. "You sent it," I said, my voice trembling with both accusation and relief. He looked at me steadily, then gave a single nod. "You deserve to know." My heart hammered. "Why? Why are you watching me? Why do you care?" He stepped closer, enough that the light revealed his face clearly for the first time. He wasn't much older than Ethan, mid-30s maybe. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that held a mix of calculation and something gentler buried beneath. A scar traced a pale line near his temple. "I care," he said slowly, "because Ethan ruins everything he touches, and he ruined me long before he ruined you." I blinked. "You knew him?" His jaw tightened. From his pocket he pulled another photo. This one wasn't of Ethan with a woman. It was Ethan, shaking hands with a man in front of a sleek glass building. The man in the photo wore the same gray hoodie. My breath stopped. I looked up at him, then back to the photo. "That's you," he nodded once. "Daniel Reed. I used to work with him, trusted him, thought we were building something real until I learned the truth." "What truth?" I asked, though my voice barely rose above the river's lapping tide. Daniel's eyes darkened. He stole from me, from clients, from partners, lied, manipulated, pocketed everything he could. And when people started asking questions, he made sure I took the fall. I stared at him, my pulse hammering. "Why are you telling me this?" He held my gaze, unwavering. "Because you need to know you're not crazy. You didn't ruin your marriage. He did. You're not weak, you're not broken, and you're not alone in this." Tears pricked hot at my eyes, but not from humiliation this time. From something I hadn't felt in months. Validation. The night around us was quiet, the hum of the city distant. Daniel's words lingered in the air, steady and unshakable. "You and I," he said finally, "we have the same enemy." My heart pounded harder. Ethan wasn't just my nightmare, he wasn't just my secret, he was part of a larger lie, one that reached beyond me, beyond us. And standing here with Daniel's eyes locked on mine, I felt the faintest shift inside me. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was preparing. The days after meeting Daniel felt different, as though the air itself had shifted. For 8 months my life had been a rhythm of hiding. Coats too big, excuses too thin, silence too heavy. Every step I took had been cautious, every word measured. But now? Now there was a crack in the shell I'd built, and through it, Light was seeping in. Daniel's words echoed in my head. You didn't ruin your marriage. He did. And you're not alone. For the first time since the papers, I let myself believe it. I started with small acts of defiance. The next morning, I pulled out the ivory maternity dress I'd hidden in the back of my closet. It wasn't glamorous, soft cotton, light floral embroidery, but it was meant to be worn, not buried under coats. I slipped it on, buttoning the collar, letting my belly show for what it was, a child, not a shame. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, my breath caught too. There I was, not invisible, not erased, a woman carrying life. I didn't flinch from the image. For the first time, I embraced it. Then came the call I had been dreading. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at my mother's number. 8 months of lies weighed on my thumb. She had begged to see me, to know how I was, and I had kept her at arm's length with excuses. I pressed dial before I could lose courage. Her voice cracked the second she answered. Claire? Honey, is it really you? Tears welled in my eyes. Mom, I need to tell you something. The silence on the other end was sharp, waiting, bracing. I'm pregnant, I whispered. 8 months. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared. I didn't want him to know. The sob that broke from her cut me to the bone. Oh, Claire, why carry this alone? Because I thought I had to. She inhaled shakily, then steadied. You are my daughter, and my daughter does not bow her head to liars. Her words hit deeper than any insult Ethan had ever thrown. For the first time in months, I felt tethered, not by fear, but by love. That afternoon, I met Daniel again. We sat in the corner booth of a different diner, far from Ethan's haunts. The lighting was dim, the coffee bitter, but the air carried something that steadied me. Resolve. I'm in, I told him. My voice didn't shake. If you want to fight him, so do I. Daniel studied me, his sharp eyes scanning, as if weighing my resolve. Then he nodded. Good, but know this, he won't go quietly. He'll try to destroy you if he thinks you're a threat. I smiled bitterly. He already tried. The only difference now is that I'm not afraid anymore. From that moment, preparation began. Daniel showed me documents, contracts Ethan had manipulated, emails dripping with arrogance, names of clients he had cheated. Each one was a shard of glass, sharp proof of the man Ethan really was. I read them, committing every detail to memory. Each page fueled my anger, but also something stronger, purpose. I didn't stop there. I cut my hair shorter, lighter, freer, a version of myself unbound by the woman Ethan once sculpted. I bought clothes that fit the body I had now, not the body I used to hide. I walked through the streets with my head high, no longer shrinking under whispers. Some people still stared, their eyes darting to my belly, but I stared back. Let them look. This was my truth, and I wouldn't bury it anymore. At night, I sat by the window, cradling my belly, speaking to the child inside me. We're almost there, I whispered, and I promise, you'll be born into a world where the truth stands tall, not his lies. The baby kicked in answer, strong and steady, as if agreeing, and I realized then I wasn't just preparing to face Ethan. I was preparing to become someone new, not the woman he had broken, not the victim the diner saw, but a mother, a fighter, a survivor. I was transforming. 2 weeks later, the chance came. Ethan's company announced a gala downtown, an event to impress investors, to polish his reputation, to prove that Ethan Thompson was still untouchable. It was the kind of night he thrived on. Lights, champagne, applause. But this time, I wouldn't sit in the shadows. This time, I was coming for the truth. Daniel and I spent nights preparing. He had emails, contracts, bank statements, proof that Ethan's empire was a tower built on lies. Each file was another nail in the coffin. And I had something just as powerful, my story. The night of the gala, I dressed with care. A simple black dress, fitted but dignified, draped softly over my swollen belly. My hair, freshly cut, framed my face with strength instead of fear. No oversized coats, no shame. I arrived alone, walking past the velvet ropes, past the stairs. Some faces widened with recognition, others whispered. I didn't flinch. Inside, chandeliers glowed over tables lined with crystal. Laughter buzzed like champagne bubbles. And then I saw him, Ethan. He worked the crowd like a conductor, shaking hands, telling jokes, spinning charm. When his eyes found me, his smile faltered, just for a breath, before he put the mask back on. He strode over, glass in hand, voice low and venomous. You don't belong here. I looked him in the eye. I belong wherever the truth is. The program began. Ethan took the stage, his voice booming, weaving a story of success. Investors nodded, cameras flashed. Then, as if on cue, Daniel stepped forward. "Before you continue," Daniel's voice rang through the microphone, steady and unshakable. "There's something everyone deserves to know." The room stilled, murmurs rippled. Ethan stiffened. On the giant screen behind him, images appeared. Ethan with the woman from the photo, time-stamped before the divorce. Contracts with falsified numbers. Emails mocking clients he had cheated. Piece by piece, his polished empire cracked open for all to see. Chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Investors stormed out. Gasps filled the hall like thunder. Ethan spun, his mask breaking, his voice desperate. "Lies, all of it. She's behind this." He jabbed a finger at me, trembling with fury. "She's trying to ruin me because I left her." For the first time in months, I didn't shrink. I stepped forward, voice clear and steady. "No, Ethan, you ruined yourself. You humiliated me in public, accused me of betrayal you committed first. Tonight, everyone sees the truth." The crowd turned toward me. Cameras captured every word. My hand rested on my belly, my child kicking, alive and strong. This baby will grow up knowing the truth, that his mother stood tall and his father fell on his own lies. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause. It was judgment. And then the storm broke. Security moved in. Investors shouted demands. Police stepped forward with warrants in hand. Ethan thrashed, shouting denials, but his words were drowned in the avalanche of evidence and betrayal. As they escorted him out, I caught one last glimpse of his face. Not the charming mask, not even the cruel smirk, but fear. Pure, unmasked fear. For once, Ethan was powerless. I walked out of the gala into the cool night, my head high, the cameras still flashing behind me. Daniel walked beside me, steady and silent. My mother waited at the curb, tears in her eyes as she opened the car door. For the first time in so long, I smiled. Not the fragile smile of survival, but the smile of victory. Ethan had tried to erase me. But in the end, he erased himself. And I was reborn. 6 months have passed since the night of the gala. 6 months since Ethan's empire collapsed under the weight of his lies. Since the world saw the man I had known in private all along. Now my world is smaller, but brighter. I live in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, in a modest 2-bedroom house with white shutters and a garden my mother insists on tending. The air smells of lavender from the pots she lines along the porch. The walls inside hum with lullabies instead of arguments. Because now, my world revolves around Noah, my son. The first time I held him, his tiny fists curled around my finger, and I felt something break open inside me. Not fear, not grief, something fierce and steady. The knowledge that I had survived long enough to give him life. That he was mine, untouched by Ethan's poison. Every night I whisper promises to him as he sleeps. Promises that he will never doubt his worth, never shrink under someone else's cruelty, never question whether he is loved. Ethan's name still surfaces in the news sometimes, but always with words like fraud, indictment, sentencing. His suits replaced by handcuffs, his smile by scowls. He used to command rooms. Now he is a cautionary tale. I don't hate him anymore. Hate is too heavy, and I've carried enough. He destroyed himself, and that's punishment enough. As for Daniel, he kept his promise. He stood by me when the world turned its back, and in the months since, he has become more than an ally. He comes by with groceries, fixes the creaky hinge on the back door, holds Noah as though he were born to. We don't label what we are yet. It's fragile, new. But when I see Noah smile in his arms, when I hear Daniel's steady laugh in my kitchen, I let myself believe in beginnings again. Sometimes when the house is quiet and the night is long, I sit by the window and think about the diner, the laughter, the shame. And then I think about the gala, the truth on the screen, the moment I found my voice. That was the night I stopped being afraid, the night I stopped being a victim. Now I am more than Ethan's ex-wife. I am Noah's mother. I am myself again. And I know this for certain. No matter how hard someone tries to bury the truth, it always rises. And so did I.